honor to be interviewing you again, especially on this AAPI month, and a very happy AAPI month to you. I was going through a website and I found your journey so inspiring, especially the fact that it started from your parents and how they came down to the US, and they became the social workers. So we really want our audiences to know more about this, and we have decided to go about this by having these certain set of questions that were pre-shared with you, and that will help us know about your journey more. And before we begin, like Nandini had already introduced, I would like you to meet my team members. It's Elora and Nandini and Priya.
Nice to meet you guys.
So starting from the very first question, why do you feel the AAPI Heritage Month is important, especially this year, and how has it changed from last couple of years?
I think that it's really important to mark any day. Otherwise, I think in the business of life, we go on to do many other things. And in this country, the fact that they've set aside AAPI Heritage Month as a celebration, as an official holiday, not a holiday, but an important month, it is being now acknowledged all the way from the White House to universities to speaking engagements. Budgets are being set aside, even at City Hall, where I participated yesterday. And then with that, the media comes. And with that, then there's more interview opportunities, just like today. And so I think that the fact that the Asian American community has played and contributed significantly to the US history, but yet we continue to be often invisible and be often be erased, or even at times demonized, that this type of AAPI Heritage Month is critical, I think, to the success and the prosperity, first of Asian Americans living in this country to reach their full potential, but at the same time for the rest of the country to acknowledge and see and value that we exist and that we also have something to offer to this country. And one more thing, the AAPI history, again, is often not recorded or lifted up, or is often again erased. And so having a month designated to focus on the AAPI community has allowed again for more opportunities to lift up and to provide the history. And so even this past week, I was a speaker for the LA Unified School District because it was AAPI Heritage Month. So for so many reasons and so many fronts, having a designated month to lift up all the works and the contributions and even the suffering of the AAPI community is critical to build solidarity with other communities of color, and yet at the same time to receive all the necessary investments that are provided to communities of need, just as it's done for all other communities, and for us to just shine our light.
That is amazing. And you rightly said when you mentioned that in this business of life, nothing can be ignored. And I feel same goes for the communities, because until unless it is diverse, I personally do not feel that it's going to go very far. And acknowledging the diversity is something that not only the US, not only a couple of countries, but the whole world should do all together. So I also wanted to know, how does your nonprofit, that is FACE, work for this cause, directly and indirectly?
For us, we have been combating the model minority myth. That is the concept that continues to say that we are all doing well and we are doing better than other communities of color. When that happens, we are pitted against other communities. And at the end of the day, it doesn't help anyone. So our organization's mission is to advance the Asian American community's participation, contribution, and influence through faith and community partnerships. So when I talk about participation, at the end of the day, we're all human, and we are all given, we're God-given potential But to reach that full potential and to realize it, we need mentorship, we need education, we need jobs, we need platforms. And so in that way, we have again advocated to the White House, to corporate officials, to educators, to so many places that the Asian American community also deserves the same resources that everyone else does. As an example, under the AAPI umbrella, there's technically 20 countries, 50 groups, and 100 languages. That's like throwing everyone at the kitchen sink under that huge group. And really it does disservice to all the subgroups that may be different than that whole average. And as an example, home ownership in this country is the way that the middle class has built the bulk of its wealth. And there's a $200,000 difference in wealth between a renter and homeowner. And what happens is that they look at the data point, they say, oh, you know what? The white home ownership rate is 66%. The Asian AAPI, when you lump everyone together, is at 61 and 62%. And then Hispanic is 48%. And then Black home ownership rate is 42%. And so when you look at that, you think, wow, Asians are doing great. They're white adjacent, they're privileged, they don't need any help. Look at the Black and brown home ownership rate. We need to put out some initiatives to help them with down payment assistance and special loan programs that will allow them to become homeowners. But when you actually disaggregate the Asian data and to look into the subgroups, as an example, I'm Korean. Korean and Black home ownership rate is the same. But if you just lump everyone together and no one is here combating that model minority myth or fighting for that disaggregated data, then it would really hide the pain of the Korean community. But that's just one. Actually, there are 7 other Asian subgroups that are below the Black home ownership rate, and 12 Asian subgroups that are below the Hispanic home ownership rate. So here are all these Asian subgroups that continue to be left out. And I'm just giving you one example on home ownership, but whether it's on jobs initiatives, that's another example. Asians, I think something is in our blood, at least for the vast majority of us. Our parents have learned from our home country that education is really the only way that you could kind of bypass and transcend all the societal pains to go up in society. And so all of us, I think, many parents, when you ask Asian parents, why did you come to America? They will all say, for our children's education and future. And so even for me, I remember, when my mom and dad was earning minimum wage, and I was killing over with sickness. I had huge fever blisters. I could barely stand. And even in that situation, my mom was begging me to just get my foot on the campus. And if I couldn't stand it anymore, that she would come back and drive and sacrifice her minimum wage hourly job, rate pay to come and take me home. And that's that kind of fervor of, the sacrifice that they're willing to make for their children's education. And because of that, Asians, in terms of their education attainment rate, surpasses everyone. It really shoots through the roof in terms of bachelor's, master's, PhD, and professional degrees. And so you would think that would translate into success in the workplace, right? And promotions in the workplace. But actually, studies show that, example, in the private sector, Asians have the lowest probability, in spite of all that great education, of being promoted to management, 55%. For Blacks, it's 65%. For Latinos, 74%. And then white, 111%. Now, that's the private sector. If you look at, government and university, there's a lot more regulations in place. So you would think that discrimination would be less. And for the Black and brown community, they actually do significantly better in terms of their promotion rate. But ironically for Asians, In universities and in government, it actually goes lower to 30 and 40%. So it is again appalling. And I believe that for us, one key, maybe two reasons is that in this country, mentorship, access, right, is something that is, and platform is definitely critical to being promoted and to be recognized and to have your contributions valued. And yet, because of our lived experience, our parents have taught us to keep our head low, our nose to the ground, and don't make a lot of noise, right? But that's kind of ironic. That's contrast to what you need to do in the US workplace to get acknowledged and to get promoted. And so that's where mentorship is so, so important. And the county has a youth at work internship program. Even though the Asian population is 17%, only 3% of the participants are Asian. This is an amazing program, ages 14 through 24, where you get paid $15 an hour. So we fought, right? When I talk about participation, we fought for 2 years so that we could have targeted outreach to the Asian community. Many of them, again, have limited English skills. And within 2 weeks after we hosted this press conference, over 400 Asian students signed up. So it's not lack of interest, but really lack of connections, access, and outreach that Asians continue to be left out. So that's one example of fighting for full participation. Second is contribution. You know what? We need to be on stage. We need to be in those decision-making rooms, right? To be able to contribute. We need the wealth, right? To have the resources to contribute. And as mentioned, the home ownership program is one that, again, Asians have been left out, but the city has a program where they help $90,000 of down payment assistance. And there's bank programs and others. And so we were responsible for introducing this type of down payment assistance program to our community. And 2 years ago, we helped individual, ABC7 covered it, only 22 years old, and we helped them with over $115,000 of down payment assistance, and they only had to pay $2,900 out of pocket, and his income was only $35,000. Right? It's an amazing, amazing opportunity, and I think within like 2-3 months after he bought his home value went up, and so suddenly, while sleeping, right, he's earning money and earning wealth. And so again, this type of opportunity where we're being invited to the White House, to those corporate decision-making rooms, to university research studies. So on so many fronts, we are elevating the work, the contribution, as well as the needs of our community, that we may again have that platform where we could contribute contribute fully. And then as mentioned about influence, when we're visible, and when people see our good works, then they value our participation, our presence in this country. And in that way, we have been able to be invited to so many rooms. We've had over 800 partners from White House to Fortune 500, and have been able to again contribute and help make decisions that include and recognize the AAPI community. One piece though, I did mention about the social work, right? So that's kind of a little bit of my personal story that I didn't get to cover. So I grew up with my parents being in ministry, and with so many faith leaders, they end up becoming first responders when individuals, families, or communities get in trouble, or there is trouble, right? Whether there is earthquake, there's a disaster, or marriage breakdown, or their child got in trouble, or they need jobs or housing. Again, they end up going to their faith leaders because someone that they trust, someone who's successful, and maybe because they're free, right? And so for all those reasons, they do so. And particularly in the Asian community, and even in the Korean community, especially, in Korea, South Korea, Christians make up only about 20-30%. But when they come to the United States, that rate goes up to 75%. because the church has stepped in place of the U.S. government to be that bridge to help new immigrants assimilate to American life and get access to those services, because most U.S. services do not reach communities like the Korean community who have limited English skills. And again, that's part of the reason why it's so critical, again, that we advocate for in-language services and in-language outreach. So long story short, I saw my parents do pretty good for what they did, but I saw their struggle. And I always carried this burden, this desire, could there be a better way to help people and to help faith leaders help people in a better way? And I grew up and I got to know Reverend Mark Whitlock and Pastor Cecil Murray at First AAMI Church. Is a very large, prominent, influential African-American church in Los Angeles. And I saw that this church did the same things my parents were doing, but because they created an affiliated nonprofit, just like any nonprofit now, they could partner with government corporations and others. And so their offering was $3 million, but they brought in an additional $12 million, right? 4 times the offering. And so now they could pay their workers, and the quantity and quality of assistance was day and night. They had affordable housing, jobs, small business loan programs, venture capital programs, a school, they had everything. But more importantly, I saw that the partners had a stake in the church's success. And they were lauding the work of the church in rooms and places where usually God, church, but especially communities of color are rarely mentioned. And because of that stake, as they were lauded, the church's influence and welcome grew, and they were invited into the decision-making room. As a Korean American, April 29th was the 30th anniversary of the LA riots. Out of all the $1 billion of damage, over 40% were incurred by Koreans. And out of all the businesses that were destroyed, over 65% were Korean owned. And yet when we were kicked down and crying, there were no one to cry with us. And what I saw in this model of partnership is mutuality. And I think that is a model that all communities should strive to achieve, to go beyond the walls of our own communities, to partner, to bring our light, our gifts into the room, but to also recognize the gifts of other communities and find ways. When I say other communities, it could be corporate America, it could be government, it could be other ethnic communities, it could be other faith communities, but each has kind of their own gifting and strength, and finding of ways that we could do that together. And then lastly, as mentioned, in this country, we are, as Asian Americans, we are invisible. We are often demonized, marginalized, or erased. And so the vehicle of fostering partnerships, where our partners now have a stake in our own success, that creates mutuality, creates a pathway where our work, our presence is valued and lauded, and where our influence and welcome can grow. And I've been privileged in being in some of these decision-making rooms, but usually I'm the only one. Or the few Asian leaders are there, but they are oblivious and unaware of some of the data points that I shared earlier, because again, this country does not lift up the pains of the Asian community. And so usually I'm that one person that's always kind of interjecting myself and saying, well, I like to speak about the Asian American community, or I like to say, well, what about the Asian American community? Or where is the disaggregated data? And so in that way, I am really grateful that I've been in these rooms, but we need more of us to be invited into those decision-making rooms as well. And I'm grateful. It was a passing thought when I said, wow, this is an amazing model. God gets honored. We get to help a lot of people, and we are welcome. and we're influential, right? And we're invited into those rooms. But it was a passing thought when I said, I want to bring it to my community. But a lot of miracles later, in 2001, our organization formed. And as mentioned, we've had over 800 partners from White House to Fortune 500. We have brought in a lot of initiatives, whether it's on home ownership, jobs, mental health, even, clean energy, electric cars, and so many, and leadership programs to bring more of us along, right? To train and equip our leaders to engage and foster partnerships that will lead to a pathway where we can have that full participation, full contribution, and full influence.
That was literally very informative, and I really hope that you will find partners by your side soon in those decision-making rooms. And I completely understand your point where you mentioned that education is how important, coming from an Indian community background, having an Indian upbringing. We also understand this value of education, and I feel this is, like you said, this is one of the major reasons of all the transfer is happening between the populations of the various countries. So the next question of mine is, how can we support Asian American and Pacific Islanders Americans collectively?
So Hypein, I think what Amrisha means is that we do help and kind of connect a lot of corporate volunteers in donating their time and money to nonprofit like yours. And often they're interested in contributing during certain months, right? So the question is that what are the different ways that we can volunteer for your nonprofits as individuals as well as teams of volunteers? So if you could give us some tangible ways that are more, easily voiced to people.
So I would say for the Asian American nonprofits in this country, a lot of times they are under-resourced, and the very important work of helping to elevate their work, and also giving them that more professional, shiny packaging, as well as fundraising, and also service on their boards are some areas that we can get the help, professional help, as well as actually currently, especially with the COVID-19, as offices have had to transition into this virtual space. Again, tools that will allow people, allow nonprofits to do gatherings like Zoom, or professional conference tools are very expensive. And so if corporate America could also help build that infrastructure or lend their tools to nonprofits, that would be some tangible ways that I believe nonprofits could get and benefit. So as an example, next month we will be having our home ownership fair, and we bring experts who either provide down payment assistance or have expertise in finding homes in this current, tough, seller's market, to resources that can help people become smart home buyers. We need help in terms of helping to get the word out into as many rooms as possible. So, if businesses have their own employees who could benefit, helping to publicize this, but also having them come and, help us with media relations, with marketing, packaging, designing, video interviews, and collecting success stories are just, again, some examples. And as mentioned, these kind of virtual platforms for hosting events can be very expensive. And so again, corporate America, a lot of times they have these tools. And so helping us in those dimensions would be great. And also at the end of the day, I think, being part of the family always allows for a greater connectivity. And so if there are corporate America individuals who would desire to serve, for example, on our board or our donor advisory board, or host events or fundraisers on our behalf, those are just, again, some examples in which it would be fantastic to receive that type of support and partnership. Oh, one other thing also is that I am invited to a lot of speaking engagements, particularly again combating the model minority myth, Black Asian solidarity, and even around the LA riots. As mentioned, we just convened a big campaign commemorating the 30th anniversary of the LA riots. The mayor and so many other multi-ethnic leaders joined us, and our press conference was covered by major media channels. And the one space that for the Korean community, our relationship with the Black community around Latasha Harlins and Sunja Do was something that was very inflammatory. It was something that was super amplified and that pitted our community against one another. And through our effort, we were able to connect with Latasha Harlan's family, Shanice Harlan's, and we were on the front page of the LA Times and actually the California section of connecting. We're hugging each other, and it has led to some amazing breakthroughs. Even Shanice sent me a text message the next day that she had a breakthrough, and she was sending love and massive respect. And so, I know that there's a pathway where our communities, who are being pitted against one another, can open our eyes, kind of like the Squid Game. Have you heard of the Squid Game? Some of you have seen it, where the game master, sets the game table where the players are being pitted against one another. And the only way they're going to end up technically winning the prize is by hurting each other and hurting themselves. And it ends up with two final winners. And that final winner, just as he's about to grab that prize, he realizes that it's not worth sacrificing his friend's lifelong friend, his own humanity, and his own integrity. And he decides to upend the game, upend the rules, and they both end up winning. And so that was the journey that we walked on, especially particularly with Latasha Harlins and also the Black community. And we've had some amazing successes. So I believe that invitations to speak on the Asian American community and building solidarity amongst different communities of color are some areas that I think is valuable, as well as some of our programs like home ownership that could be introduced to the different affinity groups. And so I would welcome that, and I'm sure that for many other Asian AAPI organizations, they would also welcome and value that opportunity, or our nonprofits being a designated nonprofit that employees can contribute to or match as well.
That is amazing. And I believe the Squid Game example is something that will also help our people understand the reason and all the hard work behind such an initiative. So, we have heard so many great things, and how the face is helping people understand the opportunities that are in front of them, and also utilizing it at maximum level. But I want to know if we have faced at any time any kind of social norms or stigma that has affected the AAPI folks.
I think yes and yes and yes, and that's part of the reason that we are so committed to combating the model minority myth. First of all, even during the LA riots, as mentioned, the devastation that our community faced, it was probably the largest incident of anti-Asian violence. And yet, instead of being treated as victims, we were, and in many ways continue to be treated as perpetrators. And even when our community was trying to rebuild, they took away the liquor license that were legally bought. And also then they were imposed additional rules like additional lighting or security when these individuals had already lost their source of livelihood. And instead of coming alongside and looking upon them as victims and such, they kick them some more when they were already kicked down. And so I think, again, that is one example of that. And even around the framing of Black-Korean conflict, it's 30 years later that I woke up to the truth. Hey, wait a minute. You know what? When I hear speakers from the Black community that I'm on similar panels, they talk about the good relationship they had with the Korean dry cleaner, with the Korean garage mechanic, or so many others. It's only that conflict arose in the relationship between a liquor store owner or convenience store owner and a Black customer in usually high poverty areas. It is a very dangerous job of being killed while working. Number one is taxi driver. Number two is a convenience store employee. And also a typical $150,000 liquor store, they generate about $2,000-$3,000 after expenses, but before payroll. Now that amount, $2,000 to $3,000, even for one person, is ridiculous. Working in such a dangerous environment, but because of the long hours, like 7 a.m. to 2 a.m., it takes two people, two shifts, which is that $2,000-$3,000 is supposed to cover 4 people's payroll. Now it's not sustainable, and that's why people take on 2 shifts and use family labor as an example. And so, even in the case of Latasha Harlan and Soon Ja-do, the Korean grocer who killed Latasha Harlan, she was facing over 40 shoplifting incidents a week. Besides the 30 robberies and 20 threats of having their stores burned down, or her son's life being threatened by gang members, and these are not empty threats. And so you could imagine the context. Definitely Latasha should never have been killed. And at the same time, I think the tragedy of that context, in which people assume that these store owners, because of the model minority myth, believe that these store owners are privileged and that they're exploiting and profiteering off the backs of the Black community, or that they're racist. It's not a matter of racism, although I'm sure there's racism in every community, but it's more that these are desperate measures when they're following, customers around the store because the police is not responding. And so I'm just giving an example of kind of the reality for so many Asians who come to America. They come here to pursue the American dream. And as it is, they're already low income because of limited English skills. Many of them end up in minimum wage jobs. They struggle and skimp. And if there were more opportunities and resources to help Asian American communities, they wouldn't be stuck there for such a long time and end up taking jobs and businesses that is almost guaranteed that you're going to be held at gunpoint, right? These people take these opportunities because their other options are equally bad. And so in that way, again, the system, for the Asian community, we're not white adjacent. We're not, privileged, as the impression is there that robs, again, our community of those resources and assistance. So it's, again, 30 years later that I say, you know what? The media played it up to say Black-Korean conflict when that was a big exaggeration and generalization that has really, again, pit our community against one another, and that has hurt us even to this day. And so the current optics of Black on Asian violence, I believe, comes from some of those unresolved tensions that were amplified, to astronomical proportions, and that the government's failure, this country's failure to combat the model minority myth that we're not privileged, we're not white adjacent, has led to this built up resentment, in which, again, the Asian community is put into this category of evil. And when you do violence and evil, you're almost like a hero. And I see that happening over and over again. And I'm in many of these rooms where corporations are talking about initiatives and investments to help communities of color, but they consistently leave out the Asian community.
Listening to the story is really bothering, and I'd like to know where are we now? Like you mentioned, all of this started with face, and you realizing where the issue lies. It started back in 2001, and now we are in 2022. So, what do you think the progress has been so far, and is it significant enough? And my second part of the question is, do we have any success story?
We have amazing success stories, but we still have a long ways to go, as mentioned. But even in 2005, through our advocacy, we won a historic $5 million grant to help API delinquent youth, right? And I would say that because of COVID-19, there was this and is this growing anti-Asian violence, and there was the Atlanta massacre. And what I noticed is that there was this new support, especially voices from the Black community who stood in solidarity with the Asian community. I believe and value and am grateful for the power of social media. I believe that we as API community, we no longer have to wait for permission for our work to be amplified. And the social media, it doesn't take a lot of money for us to organize ourselves. And so as mentioned in the past, the investment in the API community is pathetically low. I've been in these rooms with corporate America heads, and as an example, in California, the API population is twice the population of the Black community. But when I looked at the funding stream from a major bank, it was half the amount, which means that we're getting 1/4 the share. And that's supposed to cover, like, at that time, I think it was like 26 API groups with different languages. So 1/4 the share that's supposed to cover the efforts of so many API. And so again, that gives us so little for the API nonprofits to be able to have that bandwidth to go and advocate and stand in the gap and build partnerships as well. However, with the Atlanta massacre, it has allowed our work and our pains to start being acknowledged. And even this past year, I believe California, there was a bill that was introduced that set aside, I believe it was $150 million to fund Stop AAPI Hate. And we are one of those beneficiaries as well, to basically, again, even as mentioned, 30 years later in commemorating the 30th anniversary of the LA riots, Black leaders as well as the mayor, the city council was acknowledging the pain of the Korean community. And even the word riot, for 30 years, it's technically been politically incorrect to use the word riot. But for the Korean community and all the businesses that lost their livelihood, it was a riot. It was not civil. There was nothing civil about that unrest. And for the first time, we're hearing and creating where there's space, where even the word riot can be used for the 30th anniversary. So I believe that there has been tremendous success and progress. Even, I never thought Asian men would be considered sexy, but now like BTS and, some of these Asian movies are being acknowledged as mainstream. And so I do see this opening, this breakthrough. It's small, and I think that we all need to fight to continue to push that window that has opened even wider. And again, definitely it will be a gift and something that we should have received long time ago, and it will bless the Asian community. But it's not a blessing just for the Asian community. I think it's a blessing for the broader community. And if I was to give the example of Susan Boyle with Britain's Got Talent, does that ring a bell? I think for many of us, we are the Susan Boyles of the world, where, we get automatically dissed because we don't look the part. But it was when she was given that platform and when she opened her mouth to share her gift, and when her gift was visible and recognizable, that was a transformative, defining moment in which the world could be blessed by her gift and also her life could be blessed. Now, she had that gift before and after Britain's Got Talent, but it was that platform and that mentorship that made the world of a difference in making her a global, right, record-breaking, artist. And so I want to just say that, for many of us, we are automatically dissed from many of these opportunities because for some reason we are treated as perpetual foreigners and we don't look the part. But if we're given the same kind of platform, mentorship, and investment and resources that's given to other members of America, I think that will be a defining moment in which this country could be blessed more with all the giftings that we have to offer as a community, and also in turn that our communities can also be blessed as well.
I think you rightly said that mentorship and platform is very important, especially for the upcoming youth. I mean, because they are the ones who create the future, and it's not just about representation, it's about inclusion, it's about change, it's about revolution. And just wanted to thank you for giving us all these tangible points for people to support your nonprofit. And just one last thing, if there is any message that you would like to leave for young people from the AAPI community who are at a tough spot, who have been unfortunately a victim of Asian hate, and if there's one thing that you'd like to tell them, what would that be?
Again, as a believer, I believe that all of us have been given that God-given light. If you're not invited to the table, if there's no seat at the table, I think it's an African-American presidential candidate, Shirley Chisholm, I believe. She said, just bring your own chair. And so I think that especially during this time when there is this great interest in the AAPI community, I would say leverage it. I know as a Korean American right now, anything Korean is like hip and cool. But you know what? You could just say, hey, just like the Koreans, if you're not Korean, you're any other AAPI, just say, hey, we have something similar, and set your own table. That's what I've learned is that when we weren't being invited to their conferences as speakers, we set up our own conference. We shined our light, we invited everyone, and when they saw that all these VIPs were in that room, they started to realize, hey, you know what, we need to pay attention to this group. So again, I want to say, don't let others give you that label. Don't take that label in. You have something amazing to offer. And I believe that, for many of us, there's pain in life, but, your pain could be a pathway to realizing your purpose. And I want to say there is an individual named Nick Buichi. He's a quadriplegic, no arms, no legs. And basically he could have taken that pain and cursed God and just decided to wallow away. But instead he took that pain, he embraced it, he transcended. And now he's a world-renowned speaker, blessing so many people, including youth. And he's happily married with a beautiful wife with, I believe, 2 children, maybe 3 children. His life would not have been compelling without his journey of pain. And so for each of you, whatever moments that you are going through right now, instead of wallowing and being overcome by that pain, push through, right? Push through and find a way to seek your purpose by using that pain as a pathway to bless others through your experience. In conclusion, I was a pastor's kid. Many pastors' kids, they all go bad and run away. I wanted to do the same. Instead of running away, I decided to run towards it and work with pastors and help them to do a better job and it has led me to all the way to the Oval Office with President Obama and then Vice President Biden. I've been speaker invited to the United Nations, hosted by the country of Azerbaijan, to so many opportunities and platforms. If I had chosen to run the other way, those blessings would never have come. So I want to encourage you, you have something amazing ahead of you as an Asian American. It makes you unique and powerful. Don't let others define who you are, and seek those platforms, seek those mentorships, connect with organizations like us. We have tons of opportunities to be able to help you realize your potential, but we're not the only one. There are enough API organizations, and for corporate America, invest in entities like us that do leadership development, where we're doing the next generation as well as faith leaders to do better and become the first AAMI churches of the world.
I think that message encouraged me so much. I am sure that it drives home the right message. And with that, we come to the end of this interview. Thank you so much. I think year on year, your energy, your enthusiasm, and your passion increases, which makes sense because there is so much work that needs to be done. But just want to appreciate you to really hustle and really show it to us in action, that what it means to push through. So thank you, and it was great speaking to you. Before you leave, we have 2 little rituals that we want to do. The first one is that we want to basically create a short video and combine a couple of snippets from different AAPI nonprofits that we'll interview, and that involves you saying a certain line. So I'll give you an example. For example, if I am an Indian, but if I was born in US, I would say, "Hi, my name is Nandini and I am Indian American." So whichever ancestry or origin you belong to, so we would just like to say that, we would just want you to say that as well.
Hi, my name is Hypein Im and I am a Korean American.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And now we'll just take a simple snapshot of this interview, and we basically want to do a gesture that represents your nonprofit or any action that you do in your daily life as a part of your nonprofit, and we'll all copy that.